But better.
Listen, I don't even use these things to see. I just use them to like hide the prodigious bags underneath my eyes. You did it, didn't you? You did it while I can't
Welcome to
look.
Ramblemancy, everybody.
Aha. I see.
What was it? Was it my just shit-eating grin that did it, or was it?
I couldn't actually see you, but I could see a bunch of teeth all of a sudden, and I was just like, "That motherfucker, he did it."
I'm oblivious. I have no idea what happened.
Well, anyway, welcome to Ramblemancy, everybody. We are here with you tonight to talk about genres. I don't know why I said it that way, but for the rest of the night, that's how I'm going to say. I'm not going to
Sweet.
do that.
Do it.
The number of times that we're going to say genres tonight, there's
Genres.
no way. Anyway, hello and welcome, everybody.
You might say there's a genre of genres that we're gonna. Never mind.
I definitely would not say that. I wouldn't say that at all. But yes, hello and welcome. Tonight we have a show for you. Specifically, that show is Ramblemancy. And I say that in case over the course of the last week you have forgotten that that's what we do on this night, because I kind of have. So, before we get into that, however, we do have some announcements. First of all, most importantly, for the last half of this month, we're going to be running a charity campaign for Asian Americans Advancing Justice. We're going to be starting that. We're going to be kicking it off tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Pacific time, where Caitlin and I will be playing Astroneer. It'll be a whole lot of fun. It's been a really long time since we've done that, and the last time Caitlin and I almost, like, the last, 20 minutes of the stream, Caitlin and I just went into this bizarre meditative, while we excavated the core of the planet. So who knows what could happen this time. But yeah, join us for some spacefaring chaos that you, yes you, even you, could participate in. And we may fall asleep, but you won't, probably, I guess. I mean, you'll fall asleep eventually. You know what I'm saying. Anyway, the point is, yeah, join us for that. It'll be a lot of fun. We'll have some more information to you as the weeks, days, whatever, time roll on, and we can be more sure about the. See, here's a little peek behind the curtain. We don't want to tell you anything that's happening and then have to take it back later. So it's really uncomfortable. It's awkward for everybody. So we're just going to tell you as soon as we 100% know what is happening. So
We're just laying down the tracks in front of us as we go.
yeah. So anyway, we're going to be letting you know as we go along what is going to be happening. Of course, earlier today on our YouTube channel, the latest episode of Infinite Horizon went up. You can watch it right now. Don't watch it right now because this is happening, so don't go watch it right now. I wouldn't recommend that unless you're really good at multitasking. But mostly it's just gonna be noise pollution, and you're not gonna be sure which stream my voice is gonna come from. You don't know. Anyway,
Wild.
don't do that, but do watch it at some point if you haven't already, because it was a pretty good one. It was a great one to come back to.
Oh yeah.
So yes, that is available.
You guys.
Tomorrow, Saturday, the VOD of In Too Deep will be on YouTube, so you can check that out tomorrow if you have missed it. I did not watch this one, but I did come in at the end where they were talking about necromancy. So
Ooh.
they were talking about creating embalming tools for Kula, which is just a terrifying thing to even consider. But so that's.
You should definitely check it out. It was a good episode.
Yeah. So that's gonna be up tomorrow. And then, of course, our latest batch of Ramblemancy episodes will be up on Monday, and this batch includes such folks as Jake Kyle, talking about TTRPG streaming. I literally did this yesterday, and I already have forgotten who is in the episodes. I'm pretty sure Justice Armin. Yeah. Justice Armin is in one of those episodes talking about engaging with TTRPGs. Yep. And somebody else. There's at least... Oh, Chans, of course. Chance.
Yeah. It was
Chance is in
Chance.
that
I'm
group where
just
we
scrolling.
Oh,
up
yeah,
to
yeah,
have
to
just
find
sort
it.
of a whole where we just have a casual ramble with Chance. So
A casual
a
ramble.
casual ramble. So yeah, go check those out on Monday. They'll be on YouTube. And we are actually very close to being up to date on our Ramblemancy on YouTube. Like I think just one more batch and we'll be up to
Yeah.
date. So
Right around the corner.
Yeah, I've been watching like the announcements of guests. I'm like,
Mhm.
ooh, we're getting caught
we're
up.
getting very close. I think this is what 93. This one that we're on right now.
Oh
Episode
gosh,
93.
probably.
Yeah,
think
we're
that's-
coming up on 100 episodes of
Coming up, yeah,
Ramblemancy, which
coming
is
up on
just wild to consider.
Yeah, it'll be sometime in June, I think. But
I think that's about when we ballparked it out.
yeah, early to mid June, somewhere in there. We have to come up with something wild for that one.
Yeah, we really do. Every single guest that we have ever had on Ramblemancy,
Oh my God.
Zoom call at the same time. No, please God.
No.
Maybe not
I'm
all.
just I'm anxious just thinking about organizing.
Maybe some though. It could be like a big. It could be a big. Well, we'll talk about it.
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. But anyway, I think that's pretty much everything. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else to talk about. In case for those of you who are Rule of Lore patrons, and specifically at the world building tier, I have once again forgotten to send out the ping on the Discord, but I'm saying it right here, right now. We're not actually going to have, because of the charity stuff, we're not actually going to have we're not going to have time to do a world building session this month, but what we're going to do instead is just double up in May. So we'll have 2 happening in May, one early May, one late May, as we usually do. So if you are one of our world builders, then keep an eye out on the Discord. We'll be announcing specifically when we'll be doing that stuff, or and we'll be or at least be trying to figure it out with you guys to see what you think. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. It turns out planning a charity takes a lot of time and effort. So so yeah.
Yes, just a bit.
So yes, we will we'll be letting you know. So we'll have 2 world building sessions in May and none of them this month. So just keep that in mind. Gemini says redacted may happen. What are you talking about? Do you know something I don't? I'm curious now.
I don't know anything. I've never known a thing in my life.
As a rule,
I've never
I try
known a
not to
single
know
thing.
anything. Anyway, hello everybody. Welcome Rainy Keys, Jolly Old Obnixels. Hello. I saw Geek Outs, Remy, hi. Edgefit, welcome. Hessen, holy crap. 9 months, Hessen. And Remy for
Awesome.
14.
Whoa.
Holy crap. Gemini Lightning, of course, is here. Welcome everybody. You know exactly. I truly I'm sure I do know. I'm sure I do know Gemini, but at this particular moment I have intentionally tried to know nothing. So, I don't know what you're talking about, but also I do. Anyway, tonight's episode of Ramblemancy. John, how do we get started?
Well, Lucas, tonight we're talking about genres, and tis but the genre that is my enemy. Fantasy art itself, but a single book. What's fantasy? It is nor dungeon nor.
Before we get into this topic, we should first ask ourselves, what is a genre? No, we won't do that. We're not doing this.
I actually have the entire what's in a name thing written out on a note on my screen. I was prepared for tonight, actually. If you want me to do it, I'll do it.
I
well,
simultaneously do and really don't want you to do that.
As someone who
it's so bad. It is so bad.
Who doesn't know anything. I am happy to learn everything. Anything.
Okay, that's actually a good place to start. Fantasy or PH fantasy?
Ah, yes, the most acidic of fantasies.
Oh my God.
I'm so sorry.
Oh,
we are back from break, absolutely on fire already. No, I think though
don't say that, John. I'm on the West Coast, and and it's almost May, so
it's true.
I take it back. No. Anyway, I didn't. Besides the stupid bit that I have veered frantically away from at this point, I didn't have a lot planned other than just ranting about Gideon the Ninth and genre intersections for an hour and a half and hoping it worked out.
Cool.
So honestly, like I think you had an interesting point to make about like about cosmic horror earlier today and ghost stories, and I think that might
I
be an
did, and I was gonna do homework so that I'd be better prepared for it, but I didn't. So excuse my extremely washed out view as I attempted to
Did we
Google.
all do a little bit of homework?
Did we? I didn't.
I
I had every
okay, sorry, I
intention to do
misheard.
it, but
I did a
misheard.
tiny bit.
I think
I
I
did a
did a
tiny bit.
I also tried, but
hold on. Okay, I got it. I got it. So, so cosmic horror, right? I was thinking about this recently because I just got done binging through all of what are the names of those shows? The Haunting of Bly Manor and The Haunting of Hill House, which I have a clear favorite, but that's not part of this discussion tonight. So what I wanted to do, what I realized is that in thinking about The Haunting at Hill House, I'm not going to spoil anything, but in The Haunting of Hill House, I was thinking about it and how like the ghosts are a byproduct of what's actually happening. It's not like the ghosts are the thing that is wrong with the house, or that is doing something. So I guess that is a little bit spoilery, but it is what it is. Anyway, the point is that I was also then looking at this definition of cosmic horror, right? So cosmic horror is about finding those moments where the unknown crashes up against the known. Maybe you've always avoided open water because it makes you feel powerless. A good cosmic horror story would play on that fear, driving you to a startling encounter with the ocean where you are forced to confront how little you can do to change the vast cosmic forces that shape humanity. If you thought we had control over our natural world, cosmic horror will make you think twice. And I was thinking about that, and let's be real here. What's more natural than death? So, I think of ghost stories as a way of exploring the concept of death and basically taking that and turning it into that exploration of something very natural, but something we don't understand, and exploring the very nature of death. And so that's actually my entire argument about why ghost stories are actually cosmic horror. So that's the whole thing.
Oh, like ghosts are essentially a stand-in there for like the inevitability of, or like the reminder to mortal beings that like you are so painfully fleeting on this earth, right? And so I can definitely see like like a solid argument, I think, for ghost stories.
Thank you, Age of Fit. I appreciate that.
This is what I get for reading chat in the middle of trying to talk.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's a very like a solid argument there to be made that ghost stories also kind of like fall under the umbrella of cosmic horror. Like I think there's like a little bit of it. I don't know, like this is interesting intersectionality because like I don't always think of like sitting around the campfire telling cosmic horror stories, but like that's kind of what you're doing.
I mean, a little bit. And yeah, Edge of It, exactly. Like in actuality, I agree. Cosmic horror and ghost stories come from the same place. Exactly, they do come from kind of the same realm. It's just that at this point, I feel like stories talking about and exploring the concept of death and the concept of an afterlife have sort of their own, have become so iconic in and of themselves that they have almost become their own genre. But I feel like they're a subgenre of the umbrella of cosmic horror. So I don't know. That's my hot take.
Heston has like a cool point here, which is he says like I think it depends on the role of the ghosts. Ghosts can also be the embodiment of our memories of those who are gone, and that's another take on like ghosts, and like a lot of times like the way that spirits will play into stories too, as part of people living on.
The real ghosts were the friends we made along the way.
it's like in Spirited Away though, sort of.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
The real ghosts were the friends we made along the way.
Oh
I mean, eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Ooh, interesting. Like ghost stories that play into revenge tales. That's
Mm.
interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
That's hmm. Cosmic horror often originated from bigoted shitbags who were scared of foreigners. That's
Yeah, we can
fair.
we can say Lovecraft's name here.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
that's
Yeah.
that's fair. I can absolutely agree with that. But I think and it's I wouldn't I take issue with the idea that cosmic horror came from bigotry, period. I think that those who were bigoted uh, took it and twisted it that way. But I think the concept of cosmic horror comes from a fear that is, or from something that is true to all humankind, and that's fear of the unknown. Like that's just sort of baked
Hmm.
into us from like a survival perspective, right? Like if you don't know,
Hmm.
then automatically it's like, I don't know about that. Like the animal brain, right?
Right.
So I think
it's like
yeah, no, exactly, Ejafit. That's yes. Often, I agree. I think it's the bigoted ones who popularized the genre for sure. I and unfortunately, often their bigotry came through in their writing and in their and sort of took shape in there. I'm thinking of a few very
Hmm.
specific tales by Lovecraft
mhm.
that were well, frankly, they weren't even the most interesting. They were some of the most boring ones that he wrote, but also they were just pretty gross, like
Ugh.
really
Yeah,
gross. Um,
yeah,
but yeah,
Yeah.
but
yeah.
I think there is something to say, like for the. I mean, you can often trace that kind of like. Oh boy, we got into it. We got into it very deep, very early on. Here we go. Let's go. I'm
Hmm.
here for it. Like you can trace bigotry and hatred, right? You can trace that back to fear, and I'm not saying that in any way as any kind of excuse or pass. I'm saying it purely as like a it's just what the way that like a base fear of unknown, of not knowing, manifested. And so when it comes out in this is my thought, I'm not a psychologist, but when it comes out in those in like the very very bigoted authors like Lovecraft and others who wrote in the genre, it makes sense that the genre that is about the fear of the unknown and the fear of the things we don't understand, it makes sense that they'd gravitate towards that genre, right? Like it makes perfect sense. It's gross and it's terrible,
Hmm.
but it makes sense that that's where they went.
Huh.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
I think like to me the essence of cosmic horror is that feeling that you get like when you walk outside at night and you look up and you see a big starry sky and for a minute you're like there's like that wonder that's there that's like wow, this is so big, and then also that tiny little feeling that's like you are so small.
yeah, yeah,
Like that little bit of unnerving that you feel that you experience there, like that I think cosmic horror takes that and just feeds into it,
hmm
you know.
yeah. But that's why I think like when it comes to ghost stories, right? Especially ones that are about that sort of talk about uh like the haunting of Hill House goes into the subject of like some of the themes I would say of that show are like Hessen mentioned memories and of those past, but also into just sort of thought, consciousness, cognition, all of those kinds of things are all prominent themes in that show. And I think it's very interesting that there are a lot of different kinds of ghosts in that show, but what it comes down to essentially is just a every single one of the characters in that show at some point has to confront something that they were afraid of, something that has manifested in the form of these ghostly images of, their fears as it pertains to the house, to life, to themselves, all of that stuff. It all comes down to that. Even though,
Hmm.
even though interestingly, that stuff is also treated as separate from them. So like the ghosts and the house and everything, like it's treated as separate from like a separate thing, but their issues are the real ghosts, like Hassan mentioned, right? Like their issues as a family, as individuals, as those kinds of things. It and so I don't know. I think it's fascinating. I ooh, interesting. Geek Out says on the most basic level, cosmic horror is about a cold and careless universe. Yeah, I mean, it's about something that's so big, so much bigger than you that you are not a factor. You don't
Hmm.
factor in. So yeah, I mean, what that's death, really. I mean, like,
Mhm.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I think a common I I can't speak universally, but I feel like a common fear for a sentient being like a human is forgetting and being forgotten and like not knowing. Like that I think is part of not knowing, but like not knowing something that you knew you used to know is an also like especially horrifying thought, and something that oftentimes I think
Hmm.
plays into both ghost stories and cosmic horror. There's a lot of like the unknowable and the ununderstandable and that sort of stuff that's wrapped up in there. And so it's really like both of those kinds of stories tend to like lean into that fear of like loss of what's up here,
Yeah.
you know.
Hmm.
We're just
yeah.
a significant portion of us is a
See,
fatty little thing with it sitting in a soup of
and
chemicals and electricity.
this is why I really like blending the genre of cosmic horror with something, because cosmic horror, if you treat it as like the way that Geek Out's mentioned, right? If you treat it that way exclusively, which I think in its purest form it probably is, uh, um, it can be a tad nihilistic, right? Because like you don't matter, nothing you do matters. One day you'll be gone, and the universe will just keep going, right?
Hmm.
Uh-huh.
but but so it can go very nihilistic. But one of the things I
Hmm.
love is when cosmic horror does a twist on that and actually makes it so that no, that's why you matter. That's
Mm-hmm.
why you matter. And I think that's such an
Hmm.
interesting like switch around on that genre, which I really love. That I that's kind of a little bit why I love both of those shows, honestly. Betrayal. Betrayal at House on the
What
Hill.
else?
No,
That's a
the
good
haunting,
game.
the haunting of
A
Hill
good
House
board
and the
game.
haunting of Bly Manor. I love those. I love both of those because they have that kind of inherent nihilism in them, but they have that inherent nihilism specifically to contrast the more hopeful elements of it,
Hmm.
which I really, really love. It's one of the reasons why, though, I love both of those shows, one more than the other, but we're not going to get into that right now. So,
Yeah, and like on this subject, I absolutely adore the Carrying Into the Void podcast, which Jordan Shively and another person are on, and it's basically like taking the cosmic horror or like just horror genre, and then like finding kind of ways to do exactly what Age of Fit is talking about, or like what we've been talking about, and kind of inject like hope or something like even kind of heartwarming about how a trope came to be, or like a particular aspect of horror, or like hope in the face of it. It's very interesting, I
mm-hmm.
think, to do that. And I 100% agree. Like hope in the horror genre, or like weirdly supportive horror is mwah.
Tonight, in breaking news, Rule of Lore admits that they prefer hope in their genres over not having it. A surprise that comes to literally no one who has ever heard of Rule of Lore.
Who has seen even 30 seconds of our content.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I also agree with this. What Edge of It says about like Western horror, which is why cosmic horror is so much in Western horror. Cosmic horror is more interesting because it doesn't come from this concept of sin, which I didn't even think about. But
Hmm.
you're absolutely right, Edge of It. Like
Hmm.
that's one of those things that I feel like gothic horror is so just sort of replete with, right? There's just so much of that. And don't
Hmm.
get me wrong, I love gothic horror, but I love gothic horror for the aesthetics rather than for the thematic elements of it. I love
Hmm.
the aesthetic
Hmm.
of gothic horror. Like give me an old crumbling castle with a lonely sad vampire and like I'm there. I'm ready.
Absolutely.
I'm here for it.
This
But
is why
yeah.
This is why I love Gideon the Ninth and Harold the Ninth so much. It's got like elements of cosmic horror in there, but also it's just like the entire aesthetic of gothic horror. And then it's also fantasy, but like Dune science fantasy. Like it's such an interesting amalgam of like all of my favorite things.
Edge of it, yes, absolutely. Make it gay and take my money.
Mhm.
Correct.
Can't take my money. That is actually Gideon the Ninth, though. Like the byline for that one is lesbian space necromancers in a gothic horror locked room mystery, and that is an array of words that like I had no conception of
Yeah.
prior to like a year ago, and then I read that tagline for the book, and I'm like, dang, that sounds right up my alley.
Yeah.
Why didn't you tell me this? I'm sure I've talked about it before. I'm sure I've talked about this book before. It's very good.
Remy says Bloodborne out here being a game not by Western developers using Western aesthetics and doesn't focus on the idea of sin. Thank you. Yes, see, that's excellent. I love that. We love to see it. Um, yeah, so much of Western horror I feel like gets is sort of synonymous with like Christianity and religion.
Yeah.
Mhm. And I don't know that it's always intentional, but it doesn't have to be to still be
Yeah,
very steeped in it, you know?
yeah. Ooh, interesting. The strain made vampires more eldritchy.
Do
Wait, what
tell.
did?
Hold on.
What?
What the hell is that? Tell me now. Um,
That is a cool idea.
yeah. To be fair, that's where our culture and its myths come from. Yeah, I mean, yes, that's fair. Um, but yeah, mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes.
I don't have any more to say than that. Like that pretty much encapsulates it right there. That's uh
More ghost and supernatural stories from a non-Christian perspective, please. Yes, thank you. I would like that very much.
yeah. Um what was I gonna say? I saw who was it? I think it was Hessen. Yeah, said that sci-fi is a common blending with cosmic horror, and that's very true. And those are my favorite cosmic horror. Although there are others that I have genuinely liked, but sci-fi and cosmic horror. See, okay, now we're getting into my argument. Okay, remember I said on Twitter today that
Yeah.
I have my hot take about genres is that basically you can make an argument for basically anything being any genre, and like cosmic horror is one of those things. Like, where is the line between cosmic horror and science fiction? Is there one? Like, definitely it's very clear when something is both, but can you have cosmic horror without it being at least somewhat fairly definable as sci-fi? I don't know. I sort
Yeah,
of
like
don't. I mean, I suppose
Oh,
there. I suppose
yeah.
it's possible. It is possible, I suppose, but I don't know.
I think it feels very Stephen King to
Yes,
write a like entirely like could happen in the real world, but like just like this weird framing of it
it's funny because you
that
said
makes
that
it
like before you said that I was thinking of The Mist specifically. So,
exactly. That's the one with the weird, horrifying bee bear monster, right?
hmm
Yeah, okay. The one that we all read
yeah.
probably in middle school or
Wait,
high
no, no,
school or
no, no,
something.
no. That's not The Mist.
Oh,
No, that's the girl who loved Tom Gordon.
Oh, we
I
had
always
this.
think
Oh
of that
man,
one.
we had this
It
conversation
had
before, I think.
Yeah, no. Sorry, I was reading chat and I was
Or
seeing Remy saying I usually define sci-fi based on technology level. Okay, that's fair, but there's plenty of sci-fi that takes place in modern times or even in like well now, looking back the past, right? There's plenty of sci-fi that has taken place in the present relative to when like the film or book came out, right? Like that's true, isn't it? I mean,
Mhm.
there's usually some element that is maybe more technological, maybe more scientific, something about like if you're talking about ET, for instance, an alien from another world, right? But here's the thing: if you want to break it down to its loosest definitions, you can basically do the same thing with cosmic horror. I'm I'm this is not a hill that I'm willing to die on, but it is one that I'm willing to bleed on a little bit. Like, I'm willing to bleed on this hill a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
bit.
Yeah, like there's I think it comes down to I think it comes down to how the thematic content of the story plays into
Hmm.
the tropes, right? And so like you have the tropic material of the story and you have the thematic material of the story. Like fantasy is fantasy, well, in many ways because of the speculative elements of it, right? You can throw like science fiction and fantasy under the speculative fiction umbrella. Um, but like fantasy or like high fantasy or heroic fantasy is that because because it's the fantasy like tropes of we have a like strange weird magical world with these different rules and a way of expressing like internal power that doesn't exist in the real world versus like this very familiar like trajectory for the story. So I think when it comes to finding the places where genres intersect or like the boundaries between them, and it depends, I think, on what like the thematic content of the story
Hmm.
is too.
Yeah, I suppose that's fair. Um, Now here is a thought though. Like, Gemini says, yes, science fiction cannot be defined in the past, but cosmic horror can. I guess it can be argued that historical cosmic horror can be described as misunderstood science fiction. Cosmic horror exists outside of science fiction, but not vice versa, in my opinion. But
Hmm.
my thought is there is sort of like an idea of retrofuturism is certainly a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is definitely a thing that exists. I mean, for instance, most or not most, but quite a lot of fantasy. This is going on to onto like the genres thing. Quite a lot of fantasy takes place in a world that's pretty low technology with people just doing what they can to survive in this environment. But almost always there is an ancient civilization, long dead civilization that often has with it like some advanced technology or knowledge beyond that which is currently common in the course of the story. Yeah, Numenera, Eberron, exactly. And like, isn't that post-apocalyptic? I mean, like, isn't that a post-apocalypse story? It could be very high fantasy,
Hmm.
but it is post-apocalypse. I mean, I don't know. I think that there's so
Hmm.
the my main argument for why you can say that like I'm not going to say in everything because I think that there and you'll I think my argument will make that clear as to why not everything. But there's a lot of things that you can argue the genre being just about anything
Hmm.
or not anything, but you can argue for anything being of a variety of different genres because the lines between genres are pretty blurred now because of all the various influences that everybody has from different sources, right? Any writer that is writing a TV show or a movie or something like that, they are influenced by a variety of things. And I guess you could say that was always true, right? But and there were times when somebody defined a genre by writing a piece or by creating something, and so that genre just became what that was, right? Whatever it was
In,
that they wrote, that's what the genre was. So like
in the way that fantasy kind of is Tolkien, like
a
or
little bit.
Tolkien is fantasy.
I
See,
take
like Tolkien the other one, but yeah. Anyway,
I take it a little bit of issue with that statement, but I I know what you're
Tolkien and that
saying.
group of authors are like I can't remember who wrote Conan, but like those people who were like at the foundation of it that like fantasy different brands of fantasy have projected outwards from. But
Maybe I don't. I'm still not sure. I agree that they defined the genre. I'm not talking about like the most popular or the most like influential. I'm talking about the thing that made the genre.
okay,
Like where it's like this genre literally did not exist before this person wrote this thing, and then we just had to come up with a new genre to describe what this was.
right. And fantasy existed before Tolkien and C.S. Lewis did, but
Mm-hmm.
they made it the monolithic thing that it is in contemporary like literature.
Yeah, like Edge of It says, they definitely defined the European fantasy genre, and I yes,
Yeah, for
there
sure.
there I can agree. Um, is Although Olivia and I were actually having this conversation recently about fantasy because she's been on a fantasy kick lately, and I've been sort of looking with rose tinted glasses at fantasy. Now that I'm not doing in any way involved with anything fantasy,
Hmm.
and I've been seeing a lot of books lately within I'm talking like within the last like 10 years or so that have intentionally defied the Tolkien Lewis fantasy, which
So
I
nice.
really am appreciative of that. Um, and I was thinking about this. The reason this came up for me is because I was thinking about this in terms of TTRPGs, right? And how, in fact, I think John, you were present for part of this conversation we were having with one of our
Otherwise,
friends about like about like running fantasy. Like, oh, I'm gonna run D&D if I'm gonna run fantasy, right? And
hmm
but for anything else, I'll run insert system here. But then I started thinking about it, like Cypher, for instance. For like, there was a while where I wasn't interested in running any kind of high fantasy game in Cypher because it would just feel to me like watered down Dungeons and Dragons. But when I started thinking about it, I was like, well, wait a second, that's not necessarily true because if you run a Cypher high fantasy game, you are essentially able to run a high fantasy game without any of the core conceits that are implied or centralized in D&D, and that's incredible. That means that your fantasy, it's going to be the opposite of watered down D&D. It's going to be something else entirely. And I was thinking about this and it made me realize how D&D literally changed the way that I ran fantasy games. Like, it standardized the way that I ran fantasy games. It created a set of expectations and understanding that was just sort of baseline, right? But
hmm
prior to D&D being my primary uh, system that I ran, my fantasy games were really weird. They were really strange, like in a good way. They were really weird because
Mhm.
I was making up the stuff in the world. I wasn't going like, "Oh yes, this is what is here in the books. So how can I adapt that to my own usage, or how can I just take directly what's in the book and apply it to the world that I am building?" I made I just made shit up. Or sometimes sometimes if I wasn't world building or whatever, the players would make up the way that magic worked. They would make up the rules for their own magic. They would make up where it came from, how what they could do with it, all that sort of stuff. So I don't know. It's really interesting. I this sort of turned into a D&D rant, which I didn't intend, but that's where we're at. So
Yeah, there's been a lot of comments in chat about how like D&D is very Eurocentric fantasy. And that's I think true. Hassan made an interesting comment that I think he thinks that's the reason why Call of Cthulhu is the more popular TTRPG in Korea and Japan than D&D is because D&D is so like Euro fantasy.
yeah, and like I guess what I'm talking about isn't necessarily just like the stuff that we hear conversations about taking place all the time, like just sort of European and colonial ideas that are central in D&D. Like that's not really what I'm talking about. Although I'm sure that factors in a lot of ways that even I'm not aware of. But I'm mostly talking about just like core conceits of world building. Like elves are a certain way and dwarves are a certain way, and they do these certain things. And I'm thinking like prior to D&D, there are so many assumptions that I make about my world that I made specifically for Pathfinder and D&D that I never would have made. They were default assumptions that I made when building that world that I never would have made before playing D&D or Pathfinder. I can directly one to one trace from my current assumptions about about the fantasy genre in TTRPGs to D&D, but not because I didn't have those assumptions before that. So like, yeah, I don't know. Mm, mm, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It because there's so much that they give you, and because it's such a monolithic game, it is super easy to like fall into the rut of like being like kind of being stuck at that baseline of D&D, like trying to, and it's something that especially as a TTRPG editor that like I have to like check myself when I'm working on projects and be like, am I approaching this with D&D brain? Because a lot of TTRPGs that I have played are D&D, and so like I have to make sure that I'm not like I'm not doing that like from a game design standpoint too. So I don't know, it's interesting, but yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So I don't know. I have a lot of I've lately felt really burned out on fantasy as a genre, um, and just in general. But I think it's more that I'm burned out on a specific type of fantasy, and that is unfortunately like that is unfortunately most of what I see out there uh, in the TTRPG world, especially, which is like mostly where I'm at these days. But
Mhm.
yeah, there's
Yeah, I certainly understand the feeling of being burned out. For me, it's being burned out on high fantasy. I tried to pick up some, I can't remember which series of books it was, but it was another one of like the old um like must read this fantasy series from, you know, like the 80s or 90s or something. Um and I got like 3 chapters in and I was asleep. I could not I could not do it. I could not do it. And like it's just I still enjoy fantasy very much. Like I really, really, really love urban fantasy. It is so cool to see the way that people will inject like wonder and magic into like everyday life and like that Ghibli feeling of just like everyday magic. The you know the core conceit of many of the Ghibli-verse films, which is, you know, what if the world wars had never happened, and also there was magic. Um, like I love that kind of fantasy, and I like that's very much what I live for. I think right now.
yeah. Um, I It's interesting. I've not been a huge fan of like modern fantasy or urban fantasy. Like it's fine and it'll entertain me for a while depending on the medium. Um, but I've never been super invested in it. Um, not for any particular reason. Like it's I think it's purely personal preference. Like it's not like I don't have anything intelligent to say about that particular genre. I'm just
Mhm.
I'm pretty much on that one. I'm just gonna live in the world of I don't really like it. So like
What was the
that's
show that I just watched recently? We all did, I think, or maybe Lucas, you didn't. Hilda, is it the animation?
You watched Hilda.
I, hell yeah, I watched
yeah, I
Hilda.
did
Hell
not.
yeah, that's definitely in my mind. It's got the modern fantasy feels to it.
Hmm.
Yeah, Hilda, for the unenlightened, you should absolutely watch it. It's on Netflix if you have
The
subscriptions. But
unenlightened.
like not sponsored, by the way.
That's right. We're sponsored by Big Water.
We're
That's right.
sponsored by Big
One
Water.
sponsor at a time.
Yeah, but no, like it's an amazing little urban fantasy story. Like you if you took like the Pacific Northwest and then just like dropped a bunch of fantasy elements into it and everybody was just like, yep, no, rocks turn into trolls at night and that's normal. You know, and that was just reality. That's kind of what Hilda is, and it's this very sweet show about a girl and her friends going around and learning things and about themselves and friendship. But it often
Saving the
like,
day in some occasions too. Also, I love that.
yeah,
Taking
and
care
it,
of business while the adults just mess around and with their heads stuck somewhere.
the adults are often the cause of the problem actually in Hilda, which is
Yeah, that's right.
the adults are like bureaucracy or like or whatever, like, you know, like problematic systemic structures tend to be those things, and then like the the like the I think the core of that show is like sharing sharing the space with other people and giving them the opportunity to or like and empathy, I think, would be another just
Mhm.
like running theme of that show, like putting yourself in not just this like your other people's shoes, but like the shoes of the environment, and like putting that in a place of importance.
Mm-hmm.
So kids on brooms.
You could take Hilda out of the country, but you cannot take the country out of Hilda.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, like I'm still I still really like medieval fantasy sort of stuff, but I'm not as much a fan. I'm trying to think of how to define like the difference between like what I am still interested in fantasy and what I'm not. And like the whole like I guess Eurocentric is maybe part of it, but I mean that does carry a certain. It's not everything for me in terms of my enjoyment about Eurocentric fantasy is like the problematic thing. It's not just the genre of like Eurocentric fantasy. That's the problem, right? There are certainly huge parts of that I'm just like I'm so tired of this. I want it to go away. But there are certain things
Mhm.
in that genre, obviously, that attracted me to it in the first place that I still like. Um, it's just I think what it is the type of fantasy that's very like um that relies on magic and prophecies to move the story along. You know,
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing. I genre criticism type shit is what I am into, like where it's like it's basically taking the stuff that we're used to, the stuff that we are bored of, and just reimagining the same things into a totally different way, in a way that kind of criticizes those things, right? And like makes you question assumptions that you make about fantasy. So like I guess in in a a broad but incomplete way, you can say yes, non-Eurocentric fantasy, but there is Eurocentric fantasy that also I think has a lot of that, and more so recently because people are just fucking sick of like Tolkien shit, you know? Like
I think we are definitely approaching a point of, there we go. There's all the words separate instead of jammed into one.
Mhm.
Approaching a point of like cultural saturation, or like literary saturation when it comes to Tolkien-esque fantasy.
yeah.
Although you should
Um,
coin that a pointing. That sounds like you could get somewhere with that,
Look,
John.
if you just smash all the words together, it's just more efficient that way, okay?
yeah,
Like just
approaching a point of a pointing.
a
Yeah,
pointing.
a pointing. Write it down. That's great.
Somebody call Webster. Um,
The Simpsons has coined dumber words, so
oh God, I've totally lost my train of thought. No thoughts, head empty, only a pointing.
A pointing, only a pointing. Only, yeah. Skyrim has. I kind of like parts of Skyrim that are kind of post-apocalyptic. The fact that there's no dwarves anymore, just dwarven ruins.
yeah, that's
So
very
there's
cool.
even Skyrim has like a post-apocalyptic vibes to it. There's like all
Yeah.
these ruins of dwarven ruins everywhere, but no dwarves, just their technology.
I also will agree with Edgefit that just doing grim dark Tolkien is not the answer, and I absolutely agree with that because um, I know that this is not as hot a take now as it would have been a couple of years ago, but it was still my take even when it was a hot take, and so I'm just gonna go ahead and say it right now. Here we go, and fuck Game of Thrones. And no, it's not because like I felt betrayed by the last season. Like I know a lot of people are like I hate Game of Thrones. That last season was terrible. And I'm like, okay, but it was terrible before that last season. You
Mhm.
understand this, right? Like it was terrible before that. Just
I
as
think
a
I'm
concept from the ground up. Like the whole it was wrought from the bottom up. Like
I think a lot of people really enjoyed like the drama of the first season of Game of Thrones, like the first like half of the, first Game of Thrones book or the first Game of Thrones
anybody could
book.
die.
And then they just
Nobody's
got,
safe. I'm like, so many people had plot armor, and it was so obvious if you were paying attention in any capacity who was going to survive and who wasn't going to. Like you just knew.
yeah. And I think especially if you were pretty schooled in European and like French history, then I think like you looked at Game of Thrones and you're like, yes, I know who's going to die now. But I think the War of the Roses is the one that like it's loosely or closely modeled off of.
Yeah.
But I feel like a lot of people got Stockholm syndrome after like really enjoying the first season of Game of Thrones, and then it was from there it was just like this is amazing. This has to be amazing,
Honestly,
right?
I think momentum
Right.
is what we can ascribe a lot of the success of Game of Thrones to. Momentum and the sunk cost fallacy. Like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh man.
like okay, I'm going to qualify this and say if you like Game of Thrones, that's fine. I don't care whether you like it or not. I truly don't, and I don't even have opinions on whether or not you should like it. All I'm saying is that there's a lot of problematic shit with Game of Thrones, and I don't even mean problematic in the sense that like it's like ooh that feels kind of gross. That's not what I mean entirely, although there certainly is that. But just when I say problematic, I mean more in terms of conceptually and thematically. There are some issues there that I'm just like, oh, actually, this is a perfect time to rant about this because we're talking about genres and this is perfect. So I think one of the reasons, my suspicion is that there are two main reasons, since we're talking about Game of Thrones, that the last season was not great. And those two, well, or that people hated it. And those two reasons are, number one is that what happened in the last season was very rushed. And Freeman and I have talked about this at length. Like that, it just felt very rushed. They needed a little bit more time to let that stuff happen in a way that felt organic. The other thing, and this is the one that I think is a little bit more important, is that people were watching Game of Thrones with the expectation that in the end, like they just had a total misunderstanding of what genre of show they were watching. They're like fantasy, so that means that in the end everything's gonna be fine. I'm like no. This is a tragedy. You're watching a tragedy, like a Shakespearean tragedy. That's what we're watching here, which means that nobody is going to turn out okay. Nothing is going to turn out great, and every single person will be brought down eventually by their fatal flaw. Like that's what we're watching.
Yeah.
Which this is where I take issue with Game of Thrones as a show, because what a terrible concept for a show to begin with. So that's why I have my issues with Game of Thrones. But so like that show, point for point, like it's a Shakespearean tragedy. And I don't know if y'all have read King Lear, but
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, I think if you went into Game of Thrones expecting Jon Snow to defeat the White Walkers and strike down Cersei and then begin a like benevolent reign over the entirety of Westeros, then like you were barking up the wrong tree.
Were you even watching the same show?
yeah, that's how I felt also about
Yeah.
Jon Snow, but also about Daenerys, when people were just sort of queening Daenerys the whole time, and I'm like, oh boy, this is not
This is not going to end well.
Yes, exactly, Gemini. The point of that show was that nobody wins. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Yeah.
Oh. Suffering porn. Hijacked Tolkien for his suffering porn. Oof. Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah.
It's a train wreck that you're watching 1/32 of a second at a time, Gemini Lightning says.
Yeah. So I mean, like, not to turn this into like a shitting on Game of Thrones episode, but like I think it's relevant to the discussion on genres, because sometimes like your understanding of genre can have a huge impact on your understanding of what you're watching, because that's precisely it. Like I didn't have any problem with what happened in the last season of Game of Thrones. I mean, other than just not liking the concept, but I didn't have any problem with it within the context of the show. I think it was done a little ham-fisted, but I didn't have any
Mm-hmm.
problem with that. With what happened. So many people were like, "Oh, of course the showrunners made Daenerys, a powerful woman go insane." I'm like, no, no, no. She was insane from the beginning, like from day one. So like it's just one of those things that for me, watching that show, it made it a lot easier for me to be fine with what happened within the context of the show, because I knew what genre of show I was watching, and what it was a tragedy, like a Shakespearean tragedy is what I was
Mhm.
watching, where nothing was going to end up good for anybody. And so I think having that knowledge of a genre is important when you're watching whatever, any given thing. That doesn't have to be Game of Thrones, but anything, because I think that gives you one, it gives you a realistic expectation for what you are watching, and two, sort of sets you up for a really pleasant surprise and appreciation when they subvert the genre.
Mhm.
That's, I
Mm-hmm.
think, very important, because that's the other side of this, right? The other side of this is subversion of genre, which is kind of, I think, a little bit what I was talking about with fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah,
It sort of harkens back to what I was talking about a little bit earlier, in that the way that genre is like kind of a combination of the themes at play, and then also like the aesthetic, or the tropes that you
mhm,
have going on. And like Game of Thrones had like tropically looked like a medieval fantasy show, and so people were like, medieval fantasy, this must be thematically also fantasy, right? Which means that everybody's going to be okay. And
yeah.
thematically, no, that's not what that show was about.
No.
You had a dissonance between I think assumptions based on like the look and the
Mhm.
some of the tropes
Yes.
in the show, like the chosen hero, born to whatever great lineage he was that would allow him to be king, that tired trope. Like you have that, and then contrast that with the thematic content of the show, which was again very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. I think this is interesting. Edgefit says subversion is not about ignoring or shitting on the original genre. That's why I said I like fantasy anime. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's exactly like that.
Hmm.
Because it just takes what's expected and presents it in an unexpected way, or presents something unexpected by building by like showing you what your expectations are, and then showing you something else entirely. It's almost as much a criticism on you, the viewer, as it is on the genre, which I think is very cool and very interesting, and a little bit maybe treading into the meta territory here, but
Hmm.
I do appreciate that, because anytime that happens in a show or a movie, where I'm like, all right, well, here it goes. This is where this happens and whatever. It builds up to that and then just doesn't do that at all, does something else. I don't just go, wow, that's cool. They were able to pull one over on me. I think it more than anything makes me reflect on myself and my own perceptions and my own expectations. And I think that's really cool. That's cool that a creator in some capacity was able to take something and make me look inward and go, huh, these are some interesting expectations that I had. Now, why do I have those expectations? And it like makes you think
Hmm.
about stuff. Not in the Christopher Nolan way. It was like, really makes you think, but like actually like makes you think about yourself. And yes, that was Christopher Nolan
Hmm.
shade. Fight me. Um,
Well, I'll say like it reminds me a little bit of like the purpose of satire, right? Which is to take thing and then re-examine it in like a patently ridiculous light
yes,
so that
yes.
it's funny, right? Douglas Adams always comes to mind, or like what's the one that everybody has to read in high school? Is it A Modest Proposal? Um,
I don't know. I didn't read it.
yeah, it's a one that like a zillion English teachers everywhere have handed to their students when they're running a unit on satire,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Hmm.
um but like in the way that that is designed to make you think differently about something or reframe it, like I don't know, that makes me think of like subversion as well. Like you're taking a common or outdated or like stereotypical aspect of something and re-examining it in a new context, right? And I think that's part of how you keep a genre or like a a, a genre of literature fresh, right? You have to it has to the world changes, and so like stories have to change with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
And
Yeah.
and
Sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
basically I think what I'm saying is that when you subvert genres, like what you're doing is you're taking like a piece of something that doesn't really belong anymore, at least in whatever intersection of genres you have decided on, or like whatever cultural context it's being written in, and then changing it kind of to fit that.
Yeah. I'll admit that I don't know enough about the genre of satire to really be able to make much intelligent commentary on it. Um, but yeah, like I think it is interesting. Like the idea of taking expectations and turning them on their heads. Like I mean it's the whole it's how I run all of my games, right? Like I intentionally will set up expectations and then just like not do that thing. But sometimes I will do the thing that I set up because then you don't know where I'm coming from.
That's
Right?
right. The old switcheroo.
It's like, aha, the
I mean,
plot twist was that there is no plot twist.
Mhm.
stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason, or archetypes are archetypes for a reason. It's because we like coming back to those things. But yeah,
hmm Yeah. Edge of It says there's something about 60s, 70s, and 80s English satire that makes me so happy. Blackadder, Life of Brian, Yes, Minister.
Blackadder.
All wonderful
Yes.
subversions of subject matter. Yeah.
I
Freeman's been trying to
fucking
get me to
love
watch Blackadder
Blackadder.
forever. Like,
Yeah.
literally since we have known each other, Freeman has been trying to get me to watch Blackadder.
Yes.
yeah, I'm an enormous fan of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I have read quite a few times, just
Yeah.
because so much science fiction is so serious. And Douglas Adams just walks in there and sort of turns that on its head, which is very enjoyable the whole
hmm
time. It's I think it's a not at all veiled criticism of like bureaucracy and stuff like and
Yeah.
those like elements of human society.
I also saw like there was some conversation about Pratchett in the chat as well. And like honestly, I've been wanting to read Discworld forever. I've
I
been wanting to
know.
read Discworld for such a long time. Um, who knows? Maybe I'll actually do it soon, one of these days. Um,
Discord Club when
yeah.
Discord Discworld Book Club. Whew.
Oh God, no.
I just like completely
Look,
tuned out
I
and
we
disassociated that
no.
whole thing.
Okay, come on. We can do better than that. We came up with the name Ramblemancy. We can do better.
Man. Oh
Yeah,
my
we
gosh.
we have we
Oh.
have we have better branding. We have drank better branding juice than that.
Yeah.
Nice branding juice. There's
Yeah.
one.
It's branding juice. My God.
Discord
Discord world.
Uh, sorry, I just spaced out because
Right.
I was just imagining like a Discord server specifically for the purposes of discussing Discworld, and it'd be Discord World, but it's it's for discussing Discworld, and
This is just where we're at now, isn't it?
Freeman's gone. All right, bye, Freeman.
Freeman's not having
Bye.
it.
Oh, he's really going. Okay. Oh no, he's back. Okay, we're good. Uh,
Mhm. Yeah. Discussing Discworld on
Discord.
Discord.
Oh, it's still going.
No, it's just Gemini lighting
Just
restated.
yeah,
I
just,
love it.
just
Yeah,
reading
yeah.
Gemini.
I had to read it.
Yeah.
Had to.
True.
Well, that was anyway.
It
Um
sure was.
it was. What was it? I don't know, but it sure was. Um what was I going to say?
Discord.
No.
That bit is evergreen. Freeman, that bit is evergreen. Discord.
And it's
Discord.
I
Which
wish I
chord?
still
No.
Discord.
I'm glad I don't have that old one though. That was
I am too.
yeah.
All right, we're not
Wait.
going to go into that.
That's true.
Sorry. Actually, yeah, Geek Outs makes. I can't believe that I didn't bring this one up first, but a satire of fantasy, and also like courtly love tradition and courtly love stories. It's The Princess Bride, one of my favorite cult classics of all time, which
Oh,
Geek
yeah.
Outs quoted in the chat with the Vizzini line. The battle, no, it starts with Wesley. The battle of wits has begun. It ends when you decide, and we both drink and find out who is right and who is dead.
Yes.
Yep.
And then, yeah, no, it's
Oh.
The Princess Bride. I've read the book, and it's much more evidently satire, I think, in the book because you are experiencing a lot of the story from like the third person limited, where you have some of the access to like everybody's thoughts. And so like every so often that something tropic, like just super ridiculously tropic happens, like Wesley will think to himself about it, and it's very funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, like The Princess Bride absolutely should be taken tongue in cheek, because that's 100% what it is.
I'm sorry. I was not focusing on a single thing you said because I saw Hessen's comment in response to Gemini's, wait, how do you put a bow on a bit anyway? And Hessen said, well, the bit goes in the horse's mouth, so it shouldn't be too hard. That was brilliant.
It's brilliant comedy.
Yes.
Brilliant comedy. I love our chat. I love our chat with my whole heart.
Oh god, I was thinking about fantasy and like weird non-standard fantasy. I'm sure many of you have seen the movie based on Neil Gaiman's Stardust.
Mm-hmm.
But have you actually read the book Stardust?
No.
Because it's really fucking weird. It's really weird. Really, really weird. Like it does not end on a satisfying ending. It ends like well after the the climax of the book. Like well after the climax. Like you have that period of denouement at the end where it's just like, yeah, whatever. But then it keeps going. And like it describes, God, it's been years since I read that, but it describes like is it Tristan? Yeah, Tristan, who is just like walking the world, exploring the world and doing all these things. I don't know. It's a long time ago, but basically it goes into so many things that happen after the story that are in no way relevant to what happened in the story. It's just what comes after, and then it just ends. It's so weird, and I like to the point where I'm not entirely sure I like it.
Huh.
That's how weird it is.
Is it like how a movie or a show will end? You're like, there's possibly going to be like other shows about this later, a spin-off, or there's gonna be a continuance?
Not quite. It just
Huh.
It's a more realistic end to the story because it explains. It doesn't just say they lived happily ever after and that's it, but instead like actually like takes you through like just sort of broad strokes summarizes what happened after the story, and then they die and that's it, like that. And then the story ends and you're just like,
that sounds
what?
upsetting.
It is, but it's not. Like it's just unsatisfying is what it is. I would describe it as unsatisfying because it doesn't end at the optimal point, right? But like that's a good example of non-standard fantasy. Like I would almost put that in the bizarre genre of like it almost feels fairy tale-ish. But with there's something else in there too. Like I couldn't tell you exactly what it is, but there's something else in there.
Like I know at one point when I was much younger, I didn't like the way the Lord of the Rings ended.
Yeah.
But then I actually was like, oh, but the story is actually continuing through Sam. And even though Frodo and others have left, the story continues through Sam. They don't go into that, but that's how it kind of like suggests things go. It's like, Yeah.
Yeah.
Frodo gives him the book. Sam has a big, lovely family, and we all love Sam. So it's like,
yeah.
I kind of grew to understand that a little better. But
Yeah.
when I was much younger, and I listened to the end of that because I didn't actually read the Lord of the Rings. I listened to it. I was like, no.
I want a feature-length film, a single feature-length film on the Scouring of the Shire. That's all I want.
Actually, that would be.
Yeah.
One film, not three.
Yeah, please,
I- I'm
one.
I'm I'm sorry. Did you said three films?
No.
I thought you said three. We'll take the content of 2/3 of a movie and stretch it out over three films.
Uh,
um, actually, when you were talking about like weird fan, I'm sorry, my brain is just hard stuck on Gideon because actually I thought about this a lot today and I haven't actually ranted that much about it. Ooh, you okay?
how? Please tell me how it's possible to hit my knee against something that my knee was like wedged up against.
Ooh.
Ow. I'm fine.
No, but I'll say like, and this I think also ties into the conversation about subversion of genre and like re-examining things because Gideon is it's such a wild intersection of I think so many genres all at once that it's really like it had the potential I think to be really discordant, right?
Oh no, no, not this again.
I did this to myself.
Pun jail. Pun jail. Damn it, where's the pun jail?
It had the potential. I broke myself. It had the potential to be really discordant when you had all of these different like thematic or like genre elements kind of playing off of one another. But I think at its heart, what at least the first book is a locked room mystery with the trappings of like a gothic horror story set in like a Dune science fantasy. I can't look. I can't look. I can't look at you, Chad. Don't look at me. Set in like a Dune level science fantasy universe, and I think that right there is almost like pushing it a little bit because you've got like these elements of the story where you have like that like examination of the inner monstrousness or whatever that comes from like a gothic horror and like the unseen monster that I think also like kind of plays into the mystery trope, and then you have all of these players locked in a house together, everyone's got an agenda and they're all chasing after something, so and I think on its own, any one of those things could have probably just like taken it down kind of a familiar route. And then you take one character and drop it into the middle of that, and it's a big fantasy hero, a big dumb fantasy hero with a sword.
Yeah.
And that just turns the entire thing on its head. Like I think you could have maybe gone like, oh, this is just gothic horror Dune, if it had not had Gideon from the title character
Mm-hmm.
in it. But having
Eponymous? Is that the name? Is that the word? Is
I think
eponymous? Yeah.
I think so.
Cool. Continue.
But
I just like words, okay?
no, I'm glad I know that word now too. But like I think injecting something that is like almost antithetical to some of the other things, like big dumb fantasy hero with sword, made that book really interesting, right? Because you have all of these like kind of crazy wild things going on around your central character who has a very specific agenda and they're coded like a fantasy hero, but you on the other hand you have like all of like the locked room mystery stuff going on around it. And so I think that's a really like elegant. I'm not sure which one we're subverting, whether like which genre we're subverting at this point, whether it's like fantasy hero tropes or whether it's like the locked room mystery. But
This is interesting. Edgefit said, as long as the main characters are in a single genre, the setting and action can have as many genres as possible. The main character's genre ties it together. That's really cool and interesting, and I've never thought about that. And I have to think about it some more, but I think at this point I'm ready to say you're absolutely correct. That's very interesting.
yeah, because like when I in the example that I've just been giving, if we think about it, like the main character of the story is big dumb fantasy hero with sword. and it doesn't matter what's going on around them as long as the main characters of that story are like on that trajectory and they stay consistent, then like
Well, it's a little bit like what we talked about with Justice when he was here about how like what matters is internal consistency, right?
mhm.
Internal consistency of the world. That's what matters. So you can have in like suspension of disbelief is not limited to just what is possible and realistic. It's what is internally consistent within the context of the world, like what makes sense within the world. And I like what Edge of Fit is saying because what it does is it gives that a limitation because it's too easy. It's very easy, I think, without a limitation to go in the opposite direction where it's like this has everything. This club has everything. Sorry. Like Pathfinder, for instance. If you ever read anything about the world of Golarion, that is just a bizarre world that has absolutely anything you could possibly think of in it, and it's a little bit too much. It is just a bit too much. But if you have a character that is in a specific genre, like the main character's in a specific genre, it doesn't actually matter what all that other stuff is because it keeps you grounded. And I think that's very interesting.
Hmm.
Well, like I think another good example of this is the first couple seasons of The Expanse, where
Mhm.
Miller is like
Right.
really driving the story. Like
Yeah.
the first couple seasons of The
So
Expanse,
I guess Miller's
very
only
was he only in one?
well,
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 well.
um,
You won't-
well,
Spoilers, but yes, ish.
um, watch the show, find out. Um, but that first season of The Expanse feels very much like
I
a
think
noir mystery in space.
parts
mm,
of it maybe.
parts of it, yeah, because I think the thing that makes the Expanse
Yeah,
interesting is that you don't actually know what genre you're watching because
I had no clue.
yeah, because any like it's all sci-fi, but like you're not
Right.
sure what flavor of sci-fi you're watching because at any point any one of the groups has a different claim to a different genre.
Mm-hmm.
Miller has his claim to that noir sort of detective type thing.
Which is which inspired Mason a little bit, that's for sure.
Yeah,
Okay,
but then
definitely.
you've also got um Avasarala, who is definitely just doing the West Wing in space.
Yeah,
So
that's like when people talk about
Huh.
like hard political sci-fi,
hmm
like that's Avasarala's
hmm
story arc, you
Yeah.
know?
yeah. So
Huh.
yeah, I think that's anyway. But yes,
Hmm.
the core yes, the point of what you were like your main point is I think still correct. But yeah.
Mhm.
Also, hello,
Huh.
John Numa. Welcome. Um, and I will take this opportunity to just say, watch The Expanse. Um,
It's very good.
it's very good, and yeah, wasn't the Battlestar Galactica reboot a political sci-fi story in some ways? Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
it definitely was. It had those elements to it. I think Battlestar Galactica is interesting because at least the reboot, because I only have vague memories of the original one. Like
Mhm.
the vaguest of memories that I watched like reruns on Sci-Fi Channel when they'd have like marathons of the old one back when I was like 9 or 10. They'd have reruns of it, and I watched so many of them. But recently, within the last like 3 or 4 years, I was watching the reboot all the way through. And yeah, there definitely is like a lot, like Hessen says, yeah, there were elements of that for sure, especially the military versus civilian tension. Absolutely.
Hmm.
What I think is interesting about Battlestar Galactica as a show, what made it easier for me to watch it, because it certainly also carries some of that stuff, some of that sort of that stuff that Game of Thrones had, where it's like everything's terrible and we're just gonna grind your face in it, right, at every step. But what I liked about it is that it felt purposeful. Unlike in Game of Thrones, where Game of Thrones is just like, yeah, that's the whole point we're making. Everything is terrible and everyone is terrible, or they are dead. But Battlestar Galactica felt like it was whenever you saw that, it felt like it was making a point. It was making a point because it was asking a question about what is human nature, right? It was asking a question like what is human nature? Is it is it just this like people succumbing to their like basest, most horrific impulses, or is it avoiding those, like making the conscious choice to avoid those things, is and then is it biology, or is it something else that makes humanity, right? In the context of like the Cylons versus humans, right, where the Cylons look like humans, and the whole time when you're asking them, or you're asking like, oh yeah, these guys are Cylons and they're terrible, it's like, yeah, but they, by all appearances, they are human, even biologically speaking, right? So like, what's the difference? It asks those questions. So I think that's one of the things that I liked about the reboot,
Hmm.
where it's very easy on the surface level to look at it. And I know this was a criticism a lot of people had about it. It's one that I had about it until I rewatched it, which is that it tended to dive too far into like the soap opera-y kind of like, relationshipy kind of shit, right? But even in those, if you look at it a little bit under the surface, it definitely, even those feel purposeful in the sense that they're asking you a question about like human nature. And I think it's asking you a question in the best way possible, where it is not clear that the show has an answer. Like, it's not pushing like, this is what human nature is, which frankly, anytime anything pushes that as like human nature is this, I'm immediately suspicious of it. So I appreciate I appreciate when a show does that. But anyway, yeah, that's my Battlestar Galactica rant, asked for by nobody. But anyway,
Ramblemancy.
No,
Ramblemancy.
and I'm glad that you made the point about humans and Cylons that you did, because like that show from its inception, like just from those two elements being in it, I think was just made to ask questions and not really answer
Mm.
them about like human nature and impulses. So like
Mhm.
it's just, Cylons are such a good foil for that particular subject matter. It's so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Yeah. I think all good sci-fi should in some way pose questions about the this sounds very pretentious to say it this way, but the human condition, essentially. It should pose questions without necessarily knowing or assuming an answer. Like, I think that is what good sci-fi should do.
Mhm.
Good sci-fi should not just ask those questions, but make you ask those questions. Frankly, that's
Yeah.
what I think that's, and honestly, it was rewatching the Battlestar Galactica reboot that made me kind of understand that, right? That's kind of what sci-fi is about. It's about asking questions like, what does it mean to be human? What makes a human? Like, what are humans like? you know, are are we fundamentally good or fundamentally evil? Is that a thing that exists? And if it is it relevant to anything?
Mm.
Right? Like, that's, I think the genres of sci-fi and and the the study of philosophy are at their core inextricable.
Yeah, and it's a little bit baked into the umbrella term with which we refer to science fiction and fantasy, which is speculative fiction,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Sure.
Which is
Yes. Yeah. I think that's probably even a better way to put it. But sci-fi, I think specifically.
mhm.
But yes.
Yeah. No, I think I think I definitely agree about sci-fi, and it's a little bit kind of just like in the way that you write a story and the way that you have to ask questions, right? You're like, okay, so how am I writing a story that is any different than, you know, April 16th, 2021, right? And so if you're going to change something about the world, then you have to project outward from the ramifications of there. And like what matters is we're we're selfish little beings. What matters is us, right? And how we react to that. And what does this change, if anything?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
What are we? Do we matter? Does us asking whether or not we matter matter? Anyway.
This is pretty deep
Whoa.
questions for the very end of Ramblemancy.
I know.
It's probably a good thing that we don't have much time left. Otherwise, we'd be prompted to actually like try and say something intelligent about this.
Not me.
I've never said anything intelligent in my life.
I know nothing.
As a rule, I try not to say anything intelligent.
That's why we have this show, is just to purposefully avoid that.
Yeah. Ramblemancy. We stream, so we don't have to say anything intelligent.
We're just people with microphones and cameras.
Yeah. And really, what is the function of a microphone and camera but to broadcast one's own ignorance? Anyway,
Wow.
Jesus Christ.
Wow.
Camera and mic on, mind off.
That is how it tends to go.
Is actually like you just click the go live button and then head empty for 3 hours. And then, like,
Legitimately, I feel like I do kind of black out and then I'm like, we'll see you the next time you decide to come. Roll with us. I'm like,
And then you wake up.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, high key. It's 8:59 and Lucas is saying we're half alive, and then I'm like posting our live notification in various discords, and then it's 10:43 and Lucas has just said the next time you decide to come roll with us. And
Well, and it's funny because I see it the most when I go back and look through clips periodically, and I'll see ones where I'm like, when did I say that? I don't remember that. I don't remember saying that. So.
Oh my god. Yeah, well, like I think I was doing it with like some of our old Conan Exiles streams. Like I saw some clips from those, and I was like, when did that happen?
John Nuba, exactly. OBS, our brains
Our
stop.
brains.
Yes.
Nice. Well said.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Good.
All right. Well, this is the end of our show, which means we've still got about 5 more minutes. So,
Sweet.
things to keep in mind. Our charity event kicks off tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Pacific time, with Caitlin and I playing some Astroneer. It'll be a lot of fun, more than likely. At least for Caitlin and I, it will be.
Big space ramp is what happened last.
Big space ramp.
I remember that.
Oh, no. The last time we did it for fundraising purposes, we did the opposite. We did.
Oh,
we went down. We
That's
built a ramp down. So, although we kind of did that last time too, because last time we were digging into the surface of the planet. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, ramps. Caitlin and I just love making ramps in Astroneer. There's been a whole lot of updates to Astroneer since the last time we played, so tune in to watch us not know how to do anything. Which, is a huge change from how we were playing before. But
night and day.
Yeah. Last time we played, we were super confident, we were competent, and we knew how to do anything and everything. So yeah. Anyway, tune in for that tomorrow at 6 p.m. Pacific time. Donate to make us do stuff or to suggest stuff that we do. We'll talk to you about it a bit more tomorrow during the stream. Of course, that charity campaign will kick off and run for the remainder of the month, culminating in some pretty special events that we aren't going to talk about right now because it's much more fun to keep you in suspense until it's happening. But yeah, just know that exciting things are coming and some very fun people are involved, and it's going to be very, very fun. Of course, today on YouTube, our latest episode of Infinite Horizon is up and ready to watch at your convenience. It's there. Go watch it whenever you want to. And speaking of YouTube, tomorrow, also, we'll have the latest episode of In Too Deep, which will go up in the morning sometime, Pacific time. I'm pretty sure it's 9 or 10 a.m. Pacific time. I don't remember when I scheduled it for, but it's coming. And then, of course, on Monday, we will have the latest batch of Ramblemancy episodes that will go on YouTube, featuring such guests as Jake Kyle, and I said them all already before, Chans,
Justice
and
Armand.
Justice Armand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's somebody else, but I do not remember who. It'll be a surprise to everybody. So yeah.
Including no, yeah.
Including us.
Me. 'Cause yeah.
Yeah. So
Damn.
yes, go and check those out as they come out. A whole lot of fun. We will obviously be on Discord, so if you've got any questions about anything or want to keep the conversation going, have more things to say or share, you can join us on Discord and post in the Ramblemancy channel, or any other channel, of course. You could do that too, because we, as I think this show clearly demonstrates, are not one-track mind. So feel free to post to your heart's content.
Ways to support the channel if you don't know already. Now you'll know. Subscribe. 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 It's just an orchestra of subscribe. I love it. Yep, that was it. I forgot. Oh no. Yeah, you could become a patron.
Just watch Freeman start sweating. It's like,
That's well, become a patron. There might be some footage there. You never know. Come check out our tabletop tool chest where we have tidbits of world building and story stuff that you can take and insert into your own stories. We have our monthly media club recommendations for you that we come out with once a month. Also world builders tier, where you could be one of the world builders and join these two once a month. In this case, next month, 2 times because charity stuff, busy, and so yeah, you can create things in the world of Infinite Horizon, our homebrewed super / sci-fi actual play set in the Cypher universe. Wow, I just brought that all out. Also subscribe.
Damn.
I said it once, I'll say it again. Subscribe to get some really cool emotes.
Subscribe.
Emotes, yes. Featuring
by,
one of the more recent ones, Or's Eyes by Leah from In Too Deep. Leah did some Or's Eyes for us.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah. So we have our own eyes emote now.
I love
Which is
that.
great because eyes is one of my favorite emojis.
For me,
And we use it a lot.
honestly, for me, like, if you took away the eyes emoji, the crying laughing emoji, and the just like crying emoji, like just bawling emoji, like I wouldn't be able to communicate online. So
Oh, also that one.
that's true. I do this a lot
You do,
because I think it's
Oh,
more
yeah.
interesting than just thumbs up. Thumbs up
Yeah.
is just like saying cool.
I know
Right?
what
Like,
you mean. Yeah.
This is like yes.
I do
Yeah,
this. I
exactly.
try to do this one because you guys see me do this, so you know, that's
Mhm.
Freeman and not some fake Freeman.
I am dying for a finger. Like the best I can get is like pointing in a direction, but I am such a finger guns person that like it kills me
Yeah.
that there's not a good finger guns emoji.
Yeah,
That's a hard one
John
to
is not
capture.
only our resident bard, but also our resident finger guns by. So like,
That's good.
I am. It's me. I am the resident finger guns by.
all right. Well, anyway, on that note, we're gonna go. We will see you hopefully tomorrow for the beginning of our charity event. As Caitlin and I play Astroneer. But if not, we'll see you the next time you decide to come roll with us. Good night and good zone, everybody. Thanks so much for coming and hanging out with us.